How have the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Arab Spring, and the change of governments in Arab countries changed the geopolitical landscape in that oil-rich region, Middle East? Do the U.S. still have control over the resources in that region?
Much to the satisfaction of the United States and its allies, there's been essentially no change in the major centers of oil production, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. The dictatorships are firmly in place. There were attempts by the population to join the Arab Spring, but they were quickly and harshly repressed with the support of the West, tacit support of the West, not so tacit support of the West. So things are in order. Other places, this is different stories. Iraq is, of course, a total ruin. One of the consequences of the Iraq War, not too surprising, but it's been, we now see it consummated, is that one victor emerged. Iraq was destroyed. The United States was pretty much defeated, had to abandon its war aims, but Iran made out fine. So Iraq is now not under control of Iran, but there's substantial Iranian influence. It's the main outside influence, which means that Iraq is cooperating in permitting supplies to the Assad government in Syria, and in general doesn't follow U.S. orders. So it's a substantial loss to the United States. You could argue about what it means for the region. The countries of North Africa were Tunisia and Egypt, which were the main centers of the Arab Spring. There have been some real successes, much more freedom of speech, much more freedom for labor organizing. On the other hand, the governments were taken over by Islamist forces, the only ones who could really organize under the dictatorships backed by the West. And they're formally in power, I doubt, and they're satisfactory to the U.S. and the West. They follow the neoliberal policies, World Bank, IMF, Treasury policies, which is primarily what the U.S. is concerned with. Frankly, I doubt that they can hold on. The uprisings, revolutions, if you like, they're not in a standstill, but they're in a waiting period. And I suspect we'll see more coming soon. And what'll come out of that, you can't predict anymore. You can predict what happened. In other countries, it's taken its own course. I mean, some of them we don't even talk about. So there are two countries of the region which are essentially under military occupation. The first is Western Sahara. The second is Palestine. The Arab Spring actually began in Western Sahara with tent cities, protests against the Moroccan rule. Was repressed violently. The Sahrawis brought it to the Security Council. It's Security Council protectorate. It's the last colony in Africa subject to decolonization. France intervened to block any discussion at the Security Council. The U.S. backed them, and that's kind of ignored. Didn't see nothing about it. The others, of course, Palestine. And that's been kept immune from the Arab Spring, at least in actions, but there's a lot of repression, and we could talk about what's going on there, but they've so far not been really part of the changes that are taking place. If anything, it's regressed there.
So there is no major power shift in the Arab world?
I think there will be a power shift. The population, it's much harder to simply disregard the populations, as had been the case under the Western-backed dictatorships. Even in the oil dictatorships, have to pay some attention, slight attention to the populations. And actually in Bahrain, where there was pretty severe repression, there have been some encouraging steps towards reform and responding to some of the popular demands. It was pretty severe for a while. Right across the causeway, eastern Saudi Arabia, which is a very crucial area, mostly Shia area, a lot of protests were very violently repressed. That's incidentally where most of Saudi oil is, so it's highly sensitive. But for the moment, it's under Western control, or at least under control by forces that are amenable to Western influence and power.